Welcome to the FinGlimpse podcast, where we analyze the world of business, finance, and the economy. We cover the latest market news, economic trends, and some interesting businesses. As a standard disclaimer, this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered investment advice. Always do your own research. Now, let's get started.
Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive.
Hi there.
Today, we're really trying to cut through the noise and get you properly well-informed about an industry that, well, it touches all of us.
It really does.
The global textile industry.
Mm-hmm.
And we're putting a special lens on India's role, which is changing fast.
Exactly. We're diving into a pretty comprehensive report from IntelSense today, going beyond just the surface facts, trying to find those surprising connections, the patterns that really matter. Our goal here is to connect the dots for you, from the raw fibers literally coming out of the ground all the way to these complex international trade disputes, hopefully delivering some of those aha moments.
So what does this actually mean for you listening? It means getting a handle on not just what's going on in this fascinating global tapestry, but really why it's happening and maybe where the next big changes are coming from. Let's start unraveling this. Okay, before we jump into the big global picture, maybe we should just, solidify the basics.
Good.
When we say textile, it sounds simple, but the report makes it clear it's way broader than just, say, the shirt on my back.
Oh, absolutely. Way broader.
Yeah.
The report defines it as, any flexible material made from a network of fibers.
Fibers, right.
Yeah, natural ones like cotton or wool, or synthetics, think polyester. And these are woven or knitted or bonded together.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. It's not just clothes. It's upholstery, household stuff like bed sheets, curtains, and a huge range of industrial products, too.
And it all starts with these, core building blocks. Can you just quickly walk us through those?
Sure, yeah. It's a pretty clear sequence. First, you get the fiber. That's the raw stuff.
Okay.
Cotton, wool, silk, or synthetics like polyester, nylon, that sort of thing.
Got it.
These get spun into yarn continuous strands.
Right.
From the yarn, we make fabric, weaving, knitting, bonding. Those are the methods.
And the last step.
And finally, the finish. This is crucial. Things like dyeing, printing, maybe waterproofing. It gives the fabric its final look or, performance characteristics.
Okay.
Understanding that sequence really helps make sense of the whole industry, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. So with that foundation, who are the actual players weaving this web? The report breaks them down in some interesting ways.
It's a really diverse ecosystem, more complex than you might first imagine. The report points to yarn and fabric manufacturers. These are described as cyclical companies.
Meaning
Their profits are really tied to what they call cotton and yarn spreads. Basically, the price difference between their raw cotton and the yarn or fabric they sell.
Oh.
And their return on capital employed, ROCE, how efficiently they use their money, can swing a lot, between 12 and 30%.
Wow, big range.
Yeah. Then you have garmenting. These guys focus just on making the finished clothes for big global brands. Typically, it's around a 15% ROCE business, partly because they don't own as many heavy assets.
And it's interesting, infant wear manufacturers gets its own separate mention. What does that signal?
Yeah, it signals it's a specific niche with pretty high barriers to entry.
Okay.
It's also about a 15% ROCE business. And the report notes the U.S. and Europe are the really big markets for that stuff.
Right.
Then there are the integrated companies.
The ones doing it all.
Exactly. Spinning, weaving, garmenting, all under one roof.
Right.
Now, integrating takes years. It's a big commitment.
But higher returns.
But potentially the highest ROCE, yeah.
Yeah.
Because they control more of the process, capture more margin.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Beyond traditional clothes, the report talks about technical textiles, home textiles, and textile sourcing.
Yes, and this is crucial for understanding the breadth of the industry today.
What's the key takeaway there?
Well, it shows just how varied the business models can be, and, their economic profiles differ a lot. Take technical textiles. These are often non-traditional uses, high barriers to entry, usually high margins, high ROCE. We should definitely talk more about those.
We will.
Then home textiles, bed sheets, towels, pillow covers, all that. The interesting thing here is Indian companies are really gaining ground on China. ROCE there is maybe 14, 18%.
And sourcing.
And textile sourcing, basically acting as the middleman for big global brands. That's fascinating because it's an asset-light model.
Meaning low investment needed.
Right. And the ROCE,
Hmm.
really impressive, like 30–40%.
Wow.
So yeah, it paints a picture of a really diverse industry, not just one monolithic thing.
Okay, you mentioned technical textiles, and I think this is where the definition of textile really explodes for most people.
It really does.
The report lists a whole universe of applications.
Yeah.
What really jumps out at you from that list? What's surprising?
What's truly fascinating, I think, is just how high-tech and honestly how critical these applications are becoming. It's not just fabric anymore. It's engineered material.
Right.
For instance, medtech. We're not just talking about bandages, right?
No.
No, think surgical sutures, contact lenses, even artificial implants. Infant diapers fall into this category, too. Textiles are literally being used inside the body, improving health outcomes.
That's incredible. What else stands out?
Well, consider geotextiles. Most people never see them, but they're vital.
For what?
Civil engineering, reinforcing embankments, helping prevent cracks in concrete using special glass or polypropylene fibers. They're sort of the hidden backbone of infrastructure.
Huh? Never thought of that.
Right. And maybe one more. Protective textiles. This is high-stakes stuff.
Like firefighter gear.
Exactly. Protection against extreme heat, radiation, bulletproof jackets, high-visibility clothing for safety. The point is, textiles are moving way beyond fashion into these fundamental engineering roles. Infrastructure, healthcare, safety. It's a big shift.
It's really amazing when you think about it that way. Textiles woven into, well, everything, from the mundane to the life-saving. Okay, let's zoom out a bit now, look at the global picture. The report offers a really interesting perspective on key markets like the UK and the US and how India fits into that whole complex trade dynamic.
Yeah, starting with the UT apparel market, India is actually doing pretty well there, ranked 4th in import share.
That's quite high.
It is. And a major factor here is the India-UK Free Trade Agreement, the FTA.
How does that change things?
Yeah, it's a potential game changer. It could give India a 12% duty advantage over China.
12%? That's significant.
It is. It basically puts India on a level playing field with Bangladesh, which already has duty-free access.
Oh.
And this is directly helping Indian exporters like SP Apparels, KPR Mills. The report is quite clear. China is losing share in both the UK and the EU markets because of dynamics like this.
So a real redrawing of the trade map happening there in the UK and EU. What about the US? Huge market, obviously. Are the dynamics similar, or is it a different story?
The U.S. is, it's a different beast altogether. It's the second largest retail apparel market globally, right after the EU 27 bloc.
16% share, the report says.
Around 16% share, yeah. And women's wear is dominant, nearly 60% of sales.
Okay.
What's interesting is that post-COVID, consumer spending on clothes really bounced back. Retail store sales kept growing.
People back in stores.
Yeah. And crucially, U.S. retail volume seems to have improved while prices stayed relatively stable. The report points to flat sales prices in Q1 of calendar year 25 supporting this.
And are we seeing that same trend, China losing ground in the U.S. as well?
We are, yes. China is definitely losing share in the U.S. market, too.
Why is that?
A couple of big reasons. Escalating geopolitical tensions, that's one. And rising labor costs in China, that's another. It's pushing global apparel sourcing away from China. The report suggests this isn't just a small adjustment. It's creating real growth opportunities for other Asian countries, and it thinks this trend will likely speed up.
And how do U.S. tariffs play into this? Where does India fit?
This is where India gets a potentially crucial advantage. U.S. importers are facing these extra duties because of reciprocal tariffs.
How much are we talking?
Potentially huge numbers, maybe U.S. $43 billion based on some recent announcements, or even at the current paused level, it's still U.S. $11 billion.
Wow.
Now, here's the key bit. India has the lowest rates imposed among all its major Asian competitors.
The lowest.
Yes. So what does that mean? It means supply chains are actively shifting. Companies are looking for places like India to source from because the final landed cost, including duties, is lower.
Makes sense.
And the report even notes that price hikes on Chinese goods in the U.S. were bigger and lasted longer compared to goods from other places directly because of those tariffs.
There's a clear cost advantage driving sourcing shifts.
Exactly. And one more point here. While India has a decent share in some cotton product exports to the U.S., it actually has a low share in the two biggest cotton product categories.
So room to grow there.
Potentially, yes. The report estimates that if India could just double its current share in those top two categories, it could mean an extra gain of nearly $1 billion US dollars.
So clear strategic advantages for India emerging from these global shifts. But let's bring it back home to India itself. It's not just about exports, right? The report talks about India's own domestic textile stores.
Oh, absolutely. India's domestic industry is a giant in its own right.
How big?
Well, it ranks in the top 5 globally for exporting several textile categories. Overall, textiles and apparel exports are projected to hit US $100 billion.
That's massive.
It is. And the industry contributes about 2.3% to India's GDP right now.
Okay.
But the projection is that could nearly double to 5% by the end of this decade.
5% of GDP.
Huge, huge. And within exports, ready-made garments are the biggest chunk, about 42.4%. And nearly 53% of all India's textile exports go to just 2 countries, the USA and China.
Interesting. Now, beyond garments, the report flags some really high growth areas within India. What are those?
Yeah, one that really stands out is the Indian composites market.
Composites, like in aerospace.
Exactly. Aerospace, automotive, construction, defense, these aren't clothes. They're engineered materials.
How are they made?
By combining textile fibers, often glass fiber, with a matrix material, usually a resin like polyester.
And that market's growing.
Growing steadily. Expected CGR of about 7.8% between 2024 and 2030. It shows India is really pushing into more advanced manufacturing areas.
Okay, interesting. What about home textiles in India? Bed sheets, towels?
That sector's on a strong comeback trail.
Comeback. What happened?
Well, demand peaked back in fiscal year 22. Then the industry hit some headwinds. Raw material prices shot up, freight costs went crazy. So FY23 saw declines.
But it's recovering now.
Yes, exports really started picking up again in Q1 of FY24. And now the forecast is for solid growth. An 8.9% CAGR between 2023 and 2032.
Wow.
Expected to reach over US $23 billion. So a robust recovery and a strong outlook.
And medical textiles, you mentioned those earlier in the technical section. How's India doing there domestically?
Also looking promising. The Indian medical textile industry is projected to hit maybe 1.7 to 1.8 billion by 2028.
Going fast.
Growing at a good clip, yeah. Around 6.8 to 7.2% CAGR. India is set to become the 3rd largest global market in this niche.
What areas specifically?
Key growth is expected in things like implantables, PTE, we all know about that now, and hygiene products. But it's not all smooth sailing. The report does mention challenges. Regulatory costs, getting access to the latest technology, finding skilled workers, usual growing pains, perhaps.
Right. Now, finally, there's a recent development mentioned regarding trade with Bangladesh. India restricting imports. What's that about?
Yeah, this highlights the strategic side of trade, especially between neighbors. India recently restricted imports of certain textiles from Bangladesh coming over land routes.
How would they do that?
The report suggests it could create a pretty significant opportunity, maybe Rs 1,000 to 2,000 crore for India's own domestic textile makers. Well, it reduces reliance on imported garments. But there's another angle. It also aims to curb the indirect import of Chinese fabric.
Routed through Bangladesh.
Exactly. Fabric that, if shipped directly from China, would face a 20% import duty. By coming through Bangladesh under certain agreements, it might have avoided that. This move tightens that up.
Okay, but there must be a backstory.
Well,
Why did India impose these restrictions now?
yes. It seems to be a bit of a tit-for-tat situation. Apparently, Bangladesh had put restrictions on cotton yarn exports from India back in April 2025.
So Bangladesh restricted India first.
That's what the report implies. India had been the top yarn supplier to Bangladesh in 2024, but then, suddenly, by early 2025, China was supplying over 95% of Bangladesh's yarn imports.
Wow, complete shift.
Huge shift. So India's move, while it might cause some temporary disruption, maybe a small 2-3% price bump on some winter clothes, it looks like a strategic response to that earlier move by Bangladesh and the changing dynamics in yarn supply, rebalancing things.
Okay, that adds important context. So bringing this all together now, stepping back again to the global view, what's the big picture for the global apparel market overall? Just how big is this thing?
It's absolutely massive and still growing, expected to hit around US $2 trillion by 2028.
$2 trillion.
Yeah, some forecasts even push that higher, maybe US $2.37 trillion by 2030, growing at roughly an 8% compound annual growth rate.
Impressive growth. And how are people buying clothes? Still mostly in stores.
Interestingly, yes. Despite the online boom, about 79% of fashion sales still happen in physical stores.
Only 21% online.
Only 21% online globally, although there are regional differences. Asians buy the most online, about 24%. Africans the least, just 4.2%.
Fascinating. And when we look at who's actually making all this stuff, who are the titans? Who controls the raw materials?
Well, by export value, China is easily the largest textile manufacturing country.
No surprise there.
No, and both the USA and China just have much, much bigger apparel markets than other countries. But here's a really crucial detail, often overlooked, that ties it all together.
Yeah.
China and India together produce nearly 50% of the entire world's cotton.
Half the world's cotton from just two countries.
Almost half, yeah. And when you connect that to everything else we've discussed, it just underlines their immense fundamental influence over the whole chain, from the farm to the factory to the final garment you buy. It all starts there, really.
Wow. What an incredible journey we've taken through the threads and fibers of this industry.
It really covers a lot of ground, doesn't it?
From just defining fabric all the way to these complex global trade strategies and geopolitical shifts. It really shows how interconnected and, well, dynamic this whole business is.
Absolutely. We've seen how India seems to be carving out a strategic advantage in this changing world. The rise of these highly specialized technical textiles moving far beyond just clothes, and that fascinating dance between tariffs, costs, and shifting supply chains. It's really a testament to how vital this industry is, constantly evolving, constantly impacting economies everywhere, often in ways we don't even notice.
So what does this all mean for you listening in? Well, maybe next time you pull on a T-shirt or, notice the fabric on your car seat or even see a bandage. Consider that intricate global dances, the fibers, the factories, the trade deals that brought it right to you.
Yeah.
Having that understanding, it doesn't just make you well-informed, does it? It kind of attunes you to these powerful, often unseen forces shaping our world.
Exactly. And perhaps it leaves you with a final thought to chew on.
Go on.
As technology keeps advancing, new materials, new processes, and as these global trade talks continue to twist and turn, how might the very fabric of our world literally keep changing, influencing everything from the everyday products we rely on to the balance of the global economy itself? Something to think about.
That's all for this episode of the FinGlimpse podcast. If you found our discussion insightful, please consider subscribing and leaving a review. We'd love to hear your thoughts and suggestions for future topics. Until next time, stay informed and make smart decisions. Goodbye.